scary. No, I got it. That was right here. Okay. Welcome to the Wednesday, February 7th, 2024 Garrison Board of Education regular workshop meeting. Dusty, will you call the roll, please?
Jocelyn Apsella. Here. David Gilbert.
Here.
Jennifer Arrington Wilson. Here. Dan Jasno.
Here.
Courtney McCarthy.
Here.
Kent Schott.
Here.
Sarah Thorne.
Here. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up, I have accept agenda changes. Do I have any recommended changes to this evening's agenda? Okay. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby accept the agenda as presented. May I have a motion, please? So moved. Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions. Thank you. All right, next we are at board president's remarks. I have a couple things this evening. As you all saw from the press release, our superintendent search is moving on to the next phase where we'll be conducting interviews. Those interviews will be held on March 4th, March 6th, March 7th, and March 11th. So remember to keep those dates free in your calendar. We're starting those meetings at 6 p.m. So we should hopefully be out at a reasonable hour. We will also be meeting February 29th at 7 p.m. to prepare ourselves for the interviews with our consultants. Okay? We also have a meeting on the 28th. So for those 2 weeks, you could just show up here every day. Great. All right. Next up, we also had the state comptroller's audit came back. I'm sure you saw some of the news articles about it. The comptroller's office decided to focus on the period, I have it written out here, July 2022 through February 2023. Am I right on that?
Yes.
Yep. They just issued their report. When they did their risk assessment, I think it's really noted, we should note that they looked at purchasing, they looked at all the departments' payroll. We had recently done an internal audit, which focused heavily on payroll and purchasing. And they chose not to look into those areas again with their risk assessment. So I want to thank Joe and his office for all the improvements that they have made. I think the comptroller's office took note of that. And then they looked at IT, and I think this was a really helpful audit, actually. I mean, I love any audit, but I thought this one provided a lot of really useful information in terms of, things we could do to be better. And with Mr. Yap's help, since we onboarded him last fall, we have already implemented some of this. A lot of it was in last year's budget. So if you remember from last year's very fun budget meetings, we talked about the changes in technology we were do, including switching to the Lyric, which has a different safety standards. Anybody had any further questions on that?
I'm still thinking about I love everyone. Anyway.
Audit committee will be meeting at some point. I know we have to look at the dates. We're scheduled for March 6th, and now we have to do interviews that date to review our response to the state comptroller's report. So we'll issue a response, which we have been working on. But all in all, it's never a bad thing to get some feedback on things we could do better. And I think it was very helpful in that. If anyone has any questions, no. Last thing, I attended the Westchester Putnam School Board Association legislative session last Thursday. And I thought it was really interesting. A lot of the state senators and representatives joined. Many of them were still in Albany, having just finished a very long education session day on the governor's budget. A lot of them, really want to go out and fight to fund foundation aid. Last year, the governor fully funded foundation aid for the first time, and this year has taken out what they call hold harmless, as I'm sure you've all been reading about. So they were really united around that message. However, I will applaud the members of the other members of the board for the Westchester Putnam School Board Association, in that they made sure to focus on some other issues. I don't know if any of you saw some of their flyers, but they didn't just talk about keeping that money in there. We also talked a lot about when the governor's saying she wants to switch our curriculum to the science 3-day. What does that mean? We're going to hear a reading presentation soon. A lot of districts are pushing back saying, thank you, we appreciate the input. However, we want it to come from New York FED. They want it to come from the education department. They don't want legislators telling teachers what to teach. And that was a very consistent message across. They also were pushing for changes in the civil service exams. They want those held more often, updated. So it was nice to see that even though there is this sort of panic around funding from the state, that they kept on message in some other areas too. And I can forward the flyers and the information they've been putting together. It's everything from, you know, is the state going to continue to fund special education the way they have in the past? I do think our representatives and Senator Woodbury, Dan Levenberg, and Rob Rawlinson were very responsive. They were very engaged on these calls. Mentioning Garrison, which was great. We do have a substantial drop in foundation aid, so that made sense, but they were very clued into our district, and that was wonderful to see. And I think that really goes a long way. Carl's efforts in lobbying them have been very well received and appreciated. So I give it to you for superintendent's remarks.
Sure. Well, on that topic, thank you. Yes, you know, but the lobbying was a collective effort, and Sarah and Courtney, when Assemblywoman Levenberg and Senator Ralston first took office, and Joe Jimmick was there as well, we invited them here. We established the relationship. We did that together, and it has really been helpful for us. So this evening, I'm thrilled to announce that Senator Levenberg has secured $125,000 CREST grant. The acronym stands for Community Resiliency, Economic Sustainability, and Technology Grant. This is a special grant where if you perform a facilities project, and our facilities department, facilities committee is working on and exploring a roof replacement for our gymnasium. When the project is completed, you receive this money, and 125,000 is significant. So we're very, very appreciative. Dana Levenberg. This is on top of a $100,000 grant in aid and a $35,000 materials and supplies for our performing arts department. So that brings the total to $260,000 in special aid from Assemblywoman Levenberg in her first year up in Albany. So learning how to navigate Albany and you know, bring so many back to for a district that is in need is very impressive. And I don't want to leave out Senator Rob Ralston. On the other side of the aisle, you know, being a Republican, you know, in Albany is a challenge, but he also was able to secure, and I spoke to him last week, he really worked across the aisle to deliver $35,000 in grant in aid, and I expressed, you know, gratitude for that, and he said he would continue to lobby on our behalf along with Dana Levenberg, and with the hopes of maybe getting that foundation aid, that the reduction that's recommended by Governor Hochul, get that restored, because that is about $230,000 for our district. So you'll hear more about that as we go through the budget process. We will track it carefully. The only other thing I will say is tomorrow evening, Garrison has its annual talent show. Students in grades 4 through 8 are amazing. They're very excited. They're working hard for the past probably 2 months. And you will be impressed. And these are all the things that they choose to share with the community. So it's a really special evening. If you can make it, please join us. And that's all.
Okay, thank you, Carl. Do you have any questions? Okay, go ahead and move on to board communications and presentations. So we're going to invite Allison and some of our teachers, Julie Green and Caitlin Moran. Thank you. Oh, yeah.
Okay. I'm really happy to be here tonight. Thank you so much for having us. I have Julie Green, who is our first grade teacher, and I have Kate Marino, who's presenting with us tonight, who is one of our special education teachers here at Garrison. So I'm really excited to present tonight on the science of reading. There's a lot of discussion surrounding the science of reading over the course of, I think, the past couple of years in particular. But way back in the day, back in 1995, when I was in college, I was studying to be a special education teacher, and that's when I had my first class in Gillingham reading instruction. So that's a big buzzword that you'll probably hear throughout the year, and perhaps you have heard before in the past. But really, I mean, it's a methodology that is very explicit instruction for teaching phonics. And I was trained in that so many years ago, and it's now becoming a component and an element of the science of reading. So for me, this is like back to my roots as a special education teacher. I've had many classes and different workshops and experiences as a teacher of reading in particular, and a special education teacher over the course of my profession. So this is like near and dear to my heart, this topic. And it's part of my own, professional expertise that I have, but I'm still a learner and I want to continue to grow in this area. There's so much to know. And recently I went to a big workshop convention where I actually sat back and I said, I felt very validated, but I said, there's still a lot to know and a lot to learn. So I'm still in my growing and learning journey. So the next slide, make sure I get this right. Before I really begin, I just want to go back to the coherence plan that we had put together a few years ago. All the work that I do, I always circle back to the coherence plan, and I just make sure that our work is grounded through the lens of the 6 skills, the 3 skills and 3 competencies, dispositions. And the one that this kind of packages nicely is the foundational literacies. And that our commitment as a school community is to make sure that our students are leaving Garrison as fluent readers and interpreters and sense makers of the world, of anything that is put in front of them, whether it's text, whether it's different forms of media, pictures, graphs, any videos, that they have different ways to express themselves in different modalities and can make sense of what is put in front of them, and then be able to articulate and share their learning with others. So these were some of the things that came out of our strategic coherence plan, which is always, my lens as a leader here. It was just mentioned that Governor Hochul had put together recently, she announced it early in January, the plan, the Back to Basics plan. And what she is really doing is holding districts accountable for making and ensuring that districts and teachers and leaders are using instructional best practices, making sure that what we do and what we put in front of kids is really grounded through the lens and the whole methodology of the science of reading. And we're going to be expected to adopt instructional practices, emphasizing phonemic awareness and phonics, decoding, vocabulary, and comprehension, and really looking through this in an interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary way. And by 2025, our districts, all of the districts in New York, will be expected to, present and certify that we're doing this. And I am feeling really good about our position and where we are right now. We are doing really well, I think, as a district, and it shows in our state tests. And we'll talk a little bit about that later, just the results, the overall results that we're getting. And I feel if we have to fill out that paperwork today, I feel pretty strongly that we do really well, that we'd be able to check off many boxes. But again, there is still some work to do, some refining, but I am absolutely, pleased where we are. when I went to the workshop, I went on January 10th, and New York State Education Department pulled together all of the surrounding districts, and they hosted and they pulled in the best minds in education, but in particular, the best minds in the science of reading. And they pulled in from Harvard University through the graduate program, who was leading this conversation. They released a bunch of briefs, and the literacy briefs really outline what the expectations are for the pre-K years, what it looks like at the elementary level for literacy instruction, and how that looks in terms of science and reading all the way up through 12th grade. You know, people oftentimes think that the science of reading and, is really about phonics instruction, and that it only happens pre-K through 2nd grade. And so there's that mindset that, that's the science of reading. Well, really, it encompasses so much more. And that's where I was having like that aha moment when I was at this workshop. Because even myself, I was thinking, I'm thinking science of reading is more at the elementary level. But it really goes and extends beyond that. So I learned a lot that day. They redefined what literacy looks like today and what it should sound like and how it should feel, what it looks like today and how it should look, later on, in the future. There's so many things that impact the being literate, and it's not just the printed, text that we see on paper, because, digital literacy is such a big part of that. So I'm not going to read verbatim, but, if you just take a moment just to look at, we really are expecting our kids to be able to read, write, listen, communicate through all language, being fluent, and making sure that they can communicate also effectively through written expression. I'm going to now pass it to Miss Green. I feel like I was here maybe 5-10 years ago talking similarly about reading, and at that point we ended up going and getting our classroom libraries, which have been valuable to all of us. So this is just basically lifelong practices of readers and writers, and it spans, like Mrs. Emmett said, across kindergarten all the way up through 12th grade and beyond. Like, we're all readers, we're all writers, and how do we do that and incorporate it into our everyday lives? And then what does it look like at the kindergarten level, at the 1st grade level, all the way up through 8th grade here at Garrison? But it looks a little different, but it does encompass all of these things: thinking, writing, speaking, reading often from a variety of texts, choosing, self-selecting texts. 1st grade, they get to, pick their own books they want to read. They get to bring them home and share them with their families. And it's a variety of texts: fiction, nonfiction. We have like theme libraries. A lot of the classrooms have. Right now, we're focusing on families, so we have a multitude of books on families in our classroom. And it's really trying to get students to read for information and enjoyment. That's like one of our goals. And that happens, and it's been happening. We want it to continue to happen. And what do students find joy in reading at school and at home? I do find, like, especially at the lower level, it is heavily phonics based and phonemic awareness, but there's also this turn in them around this time of the year where they're like, oh, I can do this, I can read this, and I can actually learn something from this. And they make that connection. So that's something really good that's happening. As far as writing, we do incorporate the writing in, and I know Caitlin will talk about this too. It interweaves the writing, the reading, the speaking. Right, we're doing nonfiction books right now, all about books. So we have nonfiction books available for the students. They're researching to the best of their abilities in 1st grade. They're animals, and it's really sweet to see like how they're trying to find information about their animals. But those are just some of the lifelong practices we want for our students. And across the board, we see it. Like 4th grade just did reports on extreme weather. So we were invited to go visit them. And so the 1st graders got to see, oh, this is like what it looks like in 4th grade, and how much more detailed the research report is. And tomorrow they're gonna get to visit their 6th grade buddies, their buddies from last year, and they're going to share books about the solar system and the research about the solar system. So it really carries over. And that's the beauty of our school too, that we're a K-8 school and they can see how it develops for them as well. So Allison talked a little bit about this too. Like when I heard like science of reading, I'm like, what is that? Is that a program? And you'll Google it and you'll see like science of reading program, or science of reading like endorsed. And you know, the more you delve into it, it's really not a program. It's just the idea of all the research over 50 years that has developed showing really what reading is. And it's beyond just phonics, it's fluency, it's decoding, it's comprehension, it's writing, it's speaking, it's all of those things, which I know as teachers here, we all do. We've been doing it, but to a degree of like, you know, how does this look for students in second grade, third grade, fourth grade going on? And also like speech, we have our speech teacher that comes into the room. It's encompassing like the whole student. And I'm finding we do have a large part of these things in our classroom right now. We have the libraries, the independent library. We have phonemic awareness activities we do. We have foundations. We do writing workshop. I think for us, it's just like pulling it all together and making sure it's a cohesive approach across grade levels.
So this particular slide shows, you know, a Venn diagram and how the science of reading and the culturally responsive sustaining education and that framework you have to have that DEI framework and your SEL framework pretty much as the foundation for learning. That's the foundation for the science of reading. So you'll see on like one side, the state is really recognizing how important that framework is to support the science of reading. And that all classrooms, you know, it starts with the teacher greeting the students at the door and creating that warm and welcoming and vibrant classroom, and making sure that the instruction is just matched perfectly to the student and that it's differentiated. It's rigorous enough, but not too challenging, and it's targeting and providing interventions for students who need it. That it's adapting to all the different abilities and levels within the classroom, that it's inclusive, and we're doing a lot of work right now with those classroom libraries and updating them and making sure that there's a reflection of each student represented within the literature that's presented in the classroom libraries. That we're also focusing and targeting those real world skills and competencies, and again, always refining what tools we're using and what pieces of literature and mentor texts, and it never ends. I think when you're constantly refining the materials that you're using, making sure that they're relevant for students and engaging. So again, that was validating when I went to the workshop in the beginning of the month, because that's the work we've been spending a lot of time on, is the DEI framework and SEL framework, social emotional learning. So I felt like, wow, we are kind of ahead of this. And I did hear, you know, some round conversation of other districts kind of having their aha moments, and they were like, like we got to do a little bit more of that. And I was kind of saying, wow, we're already doing that. So it felt really nice to feel like we were a little bit ahead of that curve. You can't really see, I just put that up there for a takeaway for you, but it says there's the truth tip. So oftentimes you hear teachers or leaders and even sometimes parents say that, you know, kids first need to learn how to read by decoding, and they have to learn their letters and their alphabet first before you read to learn. And that's like been a very sort of popular like little saying. And really, there are no two distinct phases in development with children when it comes to reading. If you don't tease them out and say, we're only going to teach you pre-K through second grade how to decode, and you're just going to learn your letters and you're going to learn to decode, you are also doing read alouds to really give them the knowledge, because we're here as knowledge builders. We're giving them knowledge, we're giving them vocabulary, and sometimes in a pre-K program, or all the time in a pre-K program, first grade, kindergarten, they're not readers yet. So you're reading to them constantly. You're showing them videos. You're using things like Brain Pop Junior. You're using Discovery Education, things like that to build their knowledge. So simultaneously, you're teaching them how to read, the decoding, and also building their comprehension through giving them lots of vocabulary and content. So that is there was a myth out there, but the truth is you're doing it together. And then the other truth tip really emphasizes in that little section just the importance of being culturally responsive with all of the materials that you're selecting, very diverse, having, you know, something for everybody in terms of the text that you're using, and just being, you know, mindful that you're responding to the needs of the students. It's all like very student-centered. Caitlin?
So this is the principles of structured literacy instruction. So this is a framework that is used to maximize opportunities for student learning and for literacy outcomes. So they're systemic and cumulative, explicit and direct, and responsive and authentic. So for example, what we use is Foundations for our phonics program, and that is a curriculum that it has a strong scope and sequence. It is teacher direct, and we gather and analyze student data, and we use that information to differentiate if needed. For students with special education services or students that have intervention services, we use a multisensory reading program, which is the See It, Say It, Write It approach. And by using these curriculums and these programs, we've noticed tremendous amount of growth in reading with students across the board that have improved their reading on their STAR benchmark assessments, on their reading level assessments. So these programs are working, and we've seen a lot of growth with these programs. The Big Six. So the Big Six skills and competencies that support effective reading and writing. So these 6 skills are oral language, phonological awareness, phonics, comprehension, fluency, and vocabulary. These 6 skills students demonstrate pre-K through 12th grade. So these 6 skills are all continually being worked on. For example, oral language, like you were saying, Julie. The 4th graders last week did a presentation to the 1st graders. So they're working on that oral language skill, but that's going to look different than a 7th grade debate class. So they're working on that oral language skill, but it's just going to look differently. Or for comprehension, for example, comprehension in kindergarten, when students are looking at books, they're looking at pictures, whereas in 4th grade, they are leaning on their schema or their background knowledge and other craft elements that author use to help them with their comprehension. So they're all, these Big 6 skills is what they're working on. It's just going to look different depending on the grade level that the student is in. And these 6 skills really support and affect reading and writing.
On the phonological awareness component, pre-K, K1 and 2 use Heggerty, the Heggerty program, which is it's a 10-minute time out of the day. It's a quick, we call it word work, but it's basically manipulating sounds with the students, and like a lot of like chopping, like right now we're doing bossy R words, so it's like just chopping words like sh, arc, sharp. So they hear it and then they have to chop it, but it's also helping them hear the individual sounds and phonemes, which also can translate over to when they're spelling. I'm like, oh, when you have to go write the word, you can try to chop it out and spell it. So there's like that connection. It's not just like 10 minutes, but it carries over. A lot of like sound substitutions. If I said mat and then take the m away and put a b, what's the new word? That. So and that I was doing it in kindergarten when I was like pushing in for intervention support at the time, and it's in parents, so I could see how it was in kindergarten. Now I see how it is in 1st grade, and it definitely builds across the grade levels. It's very beneficial to them. They you know, it's 10 minutes. They love it. Some of them, like, you know, it's like, oh, I gotta move a little, but you know, they get to do it. And we do a lot of like, you know, punch up the sounds and things like that. So that's a snippet of it, but like they all go together. You know, they all meld together. And the fluency is tied into that too. We'll even do like sentences in Heggerty, like
read the words and how many words are in the sentence.
So yeah, the big six skills, they all come together. Reading is writing, writing is reading. So this is reciprocal. So as students develop and refine their writing skills, they become stronger readers. Their ability to think critically about what they are reading also improves along with their craft as a writer or as an author. So we like to look at reading and writing together. So the stronger you are as a reader, you are as a writer. The stronger you are as a writer, you are as a reader. We look at it together. So for example, in third grade unit of study we just are wrapping up is nonfiction, and the students were able to read tons of nonfiction texts, and they were able to analyze them and look at them and read them and look at all the different text features. And then when the writer, they learned all the different things that those authors were putting into those nonfiction texts, they were doing it and implementing those text features into their own writing, into their own nonfiction books. So they're learning from their reading as they're doing their writing, and the same with their writing as with their reading. So we look at it together, but then also we look at it separate when they're writing a personal narrative. We'll use mentor texts and have different stories about personal narratives and their simple stories and their seed stories, as we call them. And then they use those craft moves and they do these author studies, and they take what those authors do in their writing and they can implement it into their own writing. So we like to look at reading and writing together as one and not two separate things.
I mean, it does like spiral across the grade. Like I said, we're working on nonfiction books, so to just build on each, year as it goes on. What they're doing. Like I'll walk by the third grade, I'm like, oh, that looks like, that we're learning about diagrams and we're learning about glossary. And at first grade level.
But that goes back to the big six, where they're always working on these skills. It just looks differently depending on.
So a lot of this we've kind of addressed, but this is just basically, what are some high impact instructional practices across pre-K and elementary and secondary. And the continuum there is collaborative and culminating projects, performances, and celebrations. So like I said, for example, we went to, the fourth grade and they presented, and it was like the first graders were glued to them listening about extreme weather. And the fourth graders were very thorough. They had a little slide presentation, so they incorporated technology as well. We share, we'll take and share our writing with the kindergarteners, and even like this year, the first graders are they knew that the first graders last year came and visited them. So they're like, when are we going to go read to the kindergarteners? So it's something that really gives them enthusiasm, encouragement, text-based discussion and writing opportunities. This is through our read alouds. Today we were reading a book about Kite Festival. And so a lot of words will show up. And I'm like, well, do you know what that means? And then we'll talk about the word. So the word was the kite had a tail. And I'm like, well, is it a tail, a tail on an animal, or is it what kind of a tail? They're like, no, it's the tail that you attach to help it fly. They also learned what a glove compartment is today. So I'm not sure how many went home looking for the glove compartment in their car. So those are just things that just come up while reading, and they're organic. It's natural. It's not like, oh, I'm going to take this book and be like, oh, we're going to do this word or this word or that word. It's just you can see at that moment what's a word that they need, a little more clarity on. And then sometimes it'll digress for about 5 minutes, and we'll get back on topic. So then just an engagement, a variety, high interest, diverse, complex text, which we do have, but I know, it would be beneficial to build up our libraries a little bit to just make sure they're encompassing a lot of different topics, ideas. And sometimes it does depend on the nature of the class. You might have a class that's super into nonfiction, and then you're like, oh, I have to go get all these nonfiction books and things. And then you want to expose them to different types of genres also. So it's just encompassing a lot of different aspects. I think our libraries have grown immensely over the past few years, but it's always an area where you're you need a refresh, or you just need to, change it up a little bit. Phonological awareness, that's our Hegarty. Phonics is our foundations. That's more a multi-sensory approach of, saying the letter, but then we'll skywrite it in the air. We'll use magnetic letters. So a lot of hands-on activities for them. And that's just not just for primary, that can go across the board, across grade levels. Upper grades could be word sorts, like mixing up, sort all your words by this sound or syllables, prefixes, all of those skills. And then fostering an understanding of print conventions, features, and functions. And that ties in with like what Caitlin said, like looking at mentor texts and seeing, how can I use this in writing? Where have I seen this somewhere else in another book? And on the bottom, I won't read all of those, but like that purposeful play is a very key component also. And that also ties in across the grade levels, that when they're working with Mrs. Arbor and they're building structures, that can incorporate science of reading. They're talking, they're discussing, they're planning. So those are just some key components. And the other part is the inclusive curriculum and assessments, which we have our FMP, which monitors the reading level, comprehension, and our STAR. I'd say one area we need to probably look towards is an in-depth look at our writing a little bit and looking at our rubrics a little more in detail. Those are all some of the things that we do across grade levels.
Why do children struggle with reading? So there could be many different barriers for students that are struggling with reading. What we like to do is we want to first find the why and then the what. So why do children struggle with reading and what can we do to support them? So what we do as teachers is we come together and sometimes we will refer students to the child study team or to the committee on special education if we see these students struggling with reading. So then we can come together as a team to come up with interventions that we can put into place to help support these students with their struggle with reading. So for example, if a student is struggling with phonological awareness or phonemic awareness, they would be in a multisensory reading. They would need to do the see it, the say it, the write it, and practice those skills of sound and symbols and the manipulation of sounds and symbols. Or if a student is having struggle with comprehension strategies, they would be in a reading group that really focuses on that skill of comprehension and working on those different strategies to comprehend different types of text and reading materials. Or motivation. Sometimes kids just they need a cheerleader. They need people to motivate them to want to read, not because they have to, but because they want to. We want to have our students be readers intrinsically, and because they're going to be readers and learners forever. So we really want to motivate them to have a love for reading. So we really work together to really put into these interventions for these children who do struggle. And we have done a lot of professional development. We've done a lot of Orton Gillingham training in the fall. All the special education teachers did a reading and writing strategy professional development. So we're learning a lot. We're continuously learning as well about these reading and writing strategies, and then we're working together to implement them to help these students that are struggling.
I think that's it. I mean, the classroom teachers and the special education teachers, we definitely like meld, and it's not just like, oh, take this student and go, off and do this with them. It's definitely a tailored approach to each individual student. And that's the beauty of like having our small class sizes and the nature of our school being, 1 or 2 of each grade level. Also, like students from first grade to second grade, they're right down the hall. I can say like, oh, this is, where they were at, and this is some of the things they need to focus on. But it's definitely like an ongoing exchange between the teachers, if they're just in the lunchroom or in the hallway or just through the meetings, just to make sure it's tailored to the specific child's needs.
So, and because of all of the work that the teachers are doing and the focused attention of the students, we're really doing well. The average growth per student is really roughly anywhere between 15 and 18 months of growth that we're seeing in a year. They're being exposed to highly effective teaching practices and methodologies. The students are responding to the instruction. And if they're not responding, like Julie and Caitlin said, we bring them to the child study team and we really go through what is happening here. And it's a problem solving, meeting that we have. And there's a protocol that we use when we're at the Child 17 and a referral. It's very specific. And there are key players at that meeting to really dissect all the different assessments to try to tease out specifically what is happening so that we can create a prescription plan for the child to implement those interventions. And then progress monitor continuously, looking at the data then informs our next move in instruction. Or it says, we say, guess what, the child is now graduating and no longer, needs to be in RTI, which is response to intervention, in those little small groups. Or we celebrate, and sometimes we even can declassify a student based on, their progress. And that is always such an amazing celebration when we get to that point. We use the data also to identify students who are, really high achieving, and what can we do for those students? Because we don't want kids to get bored in the classroom and say, I already know this. Like, we want to constantly be holding the bar up here for our kids, but, making it not too much where you're going to reach a frustrational level. It has to be just right, rigorous for all kids, and really kind of honoring every student individually. So it's a big celebration for us. 19 out of 661, top 3%. It's also at the same time like, oh, how are we going to maintain this? Because it's like, now we are doing so well and we want to continue doing well. And again, we are all committed to learning as a professional community. There are other contributors to why we're doing well. And I think that, we have kind of rounded out some of our other additional programs that we have, not just the science of reading and not just looking at our literacy instruction, but there are other contributors such as, again, I mentioned the frameworks, the DEI framework and SEL framework is critical as the foundation. We have the foundations program. PIF is our intervention program. It's short for preventing academic failure, which is an Orton-Gillingham reading approach, which is the science of reading. It's a component of that teaches kids how to decode and learn to read. And then we have other like companions. We have Lexia, which is a computer-based adaptive program that also addresses phonics instruction and addresses comprehension. Hegarty, like we mentioned, which is really phonemic awareness and manipulation of sounds. And it's really like whole body, and James was really instrumental with helping to bring that in. And we have TC, and there is some controversy out there about TC, the teacher college, with Lucy Calkins, and whether or not we should move in a different direction and maybe, not use the teacher college any longer. I feel that there's a lot of really good elements to the teacher college curriculum that we have in place, because we can pair it with foundations so that we are ensuring that kids are getting the phonics instruction that they need, and also pairing it with high quality pieces of literature and also high quality articles and other pieces of mentor texts. So I feel like we're supplementing really well to make sure that the kids are getting relevant and high interest materials in their hands. So we're not ready to jump ship on teacher college, but we are supplementing. And I think one of the other things I just want to mention here is that things like our environmental education program and our band program, and those things cannot be like ignored, because it creates, that's what we mean by child-centered. Like, we are addressing the children's passions and interests and what they, what is going to like add to them as individuals, which then boosts their learning abilities. And I think that's pretty much it that I really kind of want to touch on. Strengthening our IEPs, the continuum of services too is an area in which like we're really kind of zeroing in on. I just have a quick, adorable 20-second video of Debbie teaching, Miss Earl teaching the preschool, because I wanted you to have like a little snapshot of what the preschoolers look like when they're doing like a little phonemic awareness lesson and how adorable. But wait a second. James, wait,
Yep.
wait, I can't.
You got it.
Do I have it? Is it
Yep.
on there?
Just click.
Thank you.
Oh, luck was all.
Two queens. All right. Ethnic. Teapot. You up, beat.
So Debbie's in her element. When Debbie said, I want to do pre-K when she was a 5th grade teacher, I was like, really? That's such a big, like, are you sure? She said, I said, go for it. And she's in her element. She really does such a beautiful job, and the kids just respond so beautifully to her. But that's like a see it, say it, and then they had a writing component. When Caitlin says, see it, say it, write it, that's that multisensory piece. So they're seeing it, they're saying it, and then they're going to write it. They skywrite it, they write it on a dry erase board or a piece of paper, and that's how it gets cemented. And then they're able to consolidate their skills and then apply. So that's just a little snapshot of pre-K. Good job. Oops, wait, now how do I advance the slide from there? Wait. Oh, well, I guess we can see it again. All right, ready? Go.
I can say, like, this translates over, like, next year in kindergarten, they'll do foundations, so it'll be more now, let's take those sounds and let's do, like, tapping, consonant, vowel, consonant sounds. And then in 1st grade, it transpires into let's do blends and digraphs with the sounds and write sentences. So there's definitely like a carryover. By 2nd grade, it's looking at the syllables of the words and breaking up syllables. So it's nice to see them like start here and then.
Well, and typically, when we didn't have pre-K, we didn't know if they were going to come in with those skills. And we would be doing this in kindergarten. So Stacy Ricky would be doing this. And now the pre-K is already doing it. And when they get to Stacy, now Stacy's current kindergarten class is, forget it, she's already into some of the 1st grade curriculum. That's where they are. They just have acquired so much being in pre-K. So it's still all developmentally appropriate and okay. It's not like we're pushing them too much or too far. It's just where they are, and they love it, and they're happy, and they're applying their skills. And then we see a big difference. We will see in 1st grade, and it's gonna really inform us on what we need to do to shift. Because we're gonna have to do some shifting. And so that's where we need to come together as, professional learning communities to really look to see, like, what is the data telling us and where do the shifts need to happen. So that's the kind of work that we're going to be doing. I have another slide. I can't get there because it's just going to keep playing that, and I don't know how to get there. But just keep playing. Okay. But the next slide really is just like key questions that I put together because as a leader, I'm always looking to refine. So for me, I'm looking at what systems I have in place right now that are going to promote professional learning opportunities, that are going to promote high risk taking for our teachers and go for it. I want our teachers to feel comfortable in trying new things and trying new books. As long as we're following what the research is telling us to do, I want our teachers to kind of go for it. I want to make sure that our school culture remains a place where it's warm and welcoming and friendly for the kids. I want kids to walk in the building feeling like, I got this. I want to keep learning. I want to do this. And that's the foundation, right? So without that, doesn't matter how good your curriculum is. Your curriculum is only as good as your culture and your climate. So that's important to us. And that we are constantly looking at the data, looking at it and perseverating on it as an RTI team, as a CST team, and we look to see. I had on Friday night. This was a couple of weeks ago. I come home, I'm excited to finally just kick up my feet. I check my email, and it's Jen Pitts sending me an email, 4th grade, 5th grade teacher on a Friday night, showing me that all her kids went in the beginning of the school year who were showing areas of concern are now all in the green. And when we're in the green, that's a big celebration. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe on a Friday night my teachers are analyzing data and celebrating on a Friday night with the principal. It was wonderful as a principal to have that kind of interaction on her night off. This was happening. So to me, it just speaks volumes about where our teachers are and how excited they are about the work that they're doing, because they're getting such feedback from the kids, and they're excited to work together just to continue making improvements, in overall literacy program. So we're excited. I hope you're excited. We are.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you, teachers. It is always wonderful when teachers come to board meetings and share what's really happening in the classrooms. I know you don't have to do this, it's taking time out of your evening, so thank you again, and Julie, I do your presentation. And it was really, it was 10 years ago. I couldn't believe. But, yeah. Good question.
I'm just curious, I'm sure that at some point, between K and 8, the kids that you have now are massively exposed to digital content, right? And I would assume that that must affect you in the way that you work with kids and teach them, whether it's positive or negative, or both.
Yeah.
And I'll bet the parents would be interested in hearing any advice
The
you've
effect
got.
of like, well, I don't, I've been primary. I try to actually limit a lot of our computer time in our classroom. We do it, but it's like, sometimes I can see they're like, oh, we're doing computers now, we're doing this now. I'm like, let's, we're gonna do a story now. So I think trying to find a balance for them and mix it up with the students. So yeah, it's okay to do this, but we have to do this also. But to talk to the older grade levels, that would be interesting, but.
They want the hard copies of things. So when I'm in a classroom, we always have to present things hard copy and digital and give them that option. I was just in a classroom just the other day, and it was the very first thing I thought, because I saw the kids overheard. What do you need this tape and hard copy? And so she had some hard copies ready to go. A lot of kids, they really want the hard copies too. It's hard to annotate digitally. They're still learning, but the computer-based testing is moving in the direction where it's like a mandate now. That the kids have to get used to using the digital tools for, annotating while they're reading and use it. And they're digital natives, so it's like they're quick study, they get it fast, but it's still a lot of research still shows that the pencil paper and tangibles is really important. You can't really abandon local digital. So the book, that's just something nice.
Do I have other questions before I go next? Go for it.
So just, you talked about how science of reading is, it's an approach, it's not, this sort of specific type of curriculum. And that we're gonna have to certify in 2025 that we teach that our curriculum imagines science of reading. I'm just wondering how you do that if science of reading is not like a clear, like rubric of things. How do you guys go through the curriculum and pre-K, K, first, second, third, all the way through and say, okay, this is science of reading, this isn't. And maybe it's that, there are curriculums that are science of reading approved, but just, how do you make that assessment? And I also wonder, how, obviously we're doing a lot of this already, but, how much do you think, how much change will need to happen to get us, fully in compliance to be able to certify that it's all science of reading?
I think where we're at right now is really like doing a lot of refining and making sure that we're consistent across, pre-K, a lot of articulation that's vertical, making sure that we are, spending a proper amount of time on phonemic awareness, the proper amount of time on decoding, and they spell it out nicely in the briefs. They give you like this graph. It's perfect because it shows you in a day, you should only be spending like 20 minutes on decoding. And our foundations, for example, the program that we're using foundations, or PAF or whatever, those are explicit reading programs. Those are reading programs that are tried and true. So as long as we're following like I feel like I'm breathing and chiming in.
Yeah, if you want, the governor, we don't know exactly what that certification will be. So, but in the past, what we've seen from the state is sometimes there is a list of state approved programs that are evidence-based. So Heggerty, foundations, I think would qualify, and we are using them, but they may ask us about our assessments. So we have the STAR reading and math assessment, the normed assessment. It is a state approved assessment. So I think it'll be not only curriculum, it'll be assessment, and there's also PD. So the PD we do that supports the science of reading and literacy. We're going to have to list that out and explain it, maybe describe it. You know, there are many, many, many schools throughout the state, so how in-depth this will be, we just don't know yet. But there'll be some kind of certification and you know, summary of what we are doing here. I believe.
And also, this is the area where the school board associations are heavily lobbying to make sure that it stays with SED, so that SED comes up with the rubric, the framework that gets passed on. They're listening to the teachers who are actually in the classroom. Because there has been talk about having legislation around this where, you know, for example, a senator proposes a bill that says you must teach X curriculum. And that happens in other states. It currently doesn't happen in New York State. They don't want to see us go down that pathway. So that's been a point in some of the lobbying meetings I've attended. Interesting to note, in the last lobbying session or one before, I think they were talking about some of the other districts were talking about, oh, we should add foundations. We have this. It was nice to hear that a lot of the programs that had been in
We've been doing
place
foundations
for a very
years.
long time are what schools are now looking to adopt within the legislature area.
And I just want to add, I really appreciated your enthusiasm. I think it was exciting to hear you present tonight. But if this is made public on the website, it would be great to include the citation of the literacy briefs. And I think, Dan, a lot of the questions that you're asking in the literacy briefs are key references and resources that are really key to where the state's heading.
I can, should I, because I can put a link right to the briefs.
Yeah, we probably should, right?
Yeah.
Because you were using their graphics.
Totally. And I have like another slide that has, what I did was I took all of the literacy briefs, but on each one, there's like citations like this. So I can definitely add all that because this came from the literacy briefs.
And so if you just cited the literacy briefs. then
Absolutely.
it would work.
Absolutely. And I'll get to them.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on Dan's question by asking you, Allison. I was struck by the fact that you said you went to the meeting and you're still learning stuff about the science of reading. So what are the really biggest unanswered questions about the science of reading that if you were running the Department of Education, you'd spend millions of dollars to find the answers? Well, just what are some of the big the things you don't know the answer to? I guess is what I'm asking.
David always loves those softballs.
I just, what I need more clarity on, and we talked about this too, Julie, me and you yesterday. Just the science of I want to dig deeper in writing. To me, writing is an area that there are some really good programs out there. I do not think that TC is the answer for our teacher college writing. I think it's part of the answer. But I really want to see what's out there in terms of different writing curriculum because, you know, it's not broken down enough. I want to also see how like social studies comes into play and science. So how we can kind of make it all make sense for kids a little bit more, working more, you know, together cohesively. I don't know really how to do that. But I just feel like writing is an area that I need more information on. And how it kind of connects. There are some really good programs that I'm familiar with that I was trained in. Judith Hoffman is one of them, which really kind of is more like, it's sort of like Judith Hoffman is more like, it's like the Orton Gillingham is to reading. That's Judith Hoffman writing. And I was trained in that years ago. We have one teacher in particular, Chrissy Valvano, who's trained in that as well, and really breaks down writing instruction. But it's an area that we don't really have. We have baseline assessments in writing, but we don't have like the companion rubric to kind of, and so these are areas that we were just talking about just yesterday and how where we're gonna, yeah, how we're gonna approach that. So it makes a little, you know, more sense for kids.
Just one more question. So are there, you know, in terms of implementing this fully, getting us to, you know, the point, I know that they haven't developed the certification yet, but, you know, as we are trying to push this throughout the curriculum, are there things that you don't have that are necessary in order for us to get there? Are there resources missing? Are we gonna incur additional costs? Are there
At
No.
some point, yeah, I mean, definitely professional development around this. You know, PD is gonna be essential. And then and having some guidance through, like, let's say a consultant or to help us identify, you know, whether it's we want to move in the direction of a curriculum or not in the future. But right now, just like selecting supplements, you know, just to some of the books that we're already using and some mentor texts and things like that. And help us moving in the direction with like the overall scope and sequence for writing. We have the next gen standards that tell us like these are the outcomes and what kids need to be able to do, let's say in third grade or by fifth grade, they need to create a 4 or 5 paragraph essay. But where are the scaffolds for that and the specific curriculum for that? We have it all teacher kind of created and they're using it and they're doing it beautifully. But there's more out there. So that's what we're going to need. We're going to need some direction, a little bit of support in that area, some PD, and definitely some additional pieces of curriculum, you know, supplements at this point.
I think in keeping with the PD is like just reassurance that we are doing a lot of this.
Yes.
That, you know, like you know, teachers all of a sudden, and I've heard lots of terms over my years, you know, and you hear, oh, science of reading, and what everything I've been doing has been wrong, you know, and why like, the kids are moving on and reading, you know. So I think just reassurance, and the PD kind of brings that on too, kind of like, you know, oh, I am doing that, or, you know, yeah, I can do it differently. So it just gives us different lens, but it does give us like a little bit of validation also that.
And guidance.
And guidance,
Validation and guidance and accountability.
I just have a request, don't answer now. When you talk about PT, you know, curriculum, and you're still throwing a little bit of a bone, but as you keep developing the science of reading, training, PD, PL, and curriculum here, if you could document the parts of that TC that you've used, that you're like, I'm so happy to get rid of this because I never believed that it worked, or anything like that. I think it's interesting. You've been teaching it for so long. I mean, I'm probably
Not that long.
Yeah. No, I mean, you've been trained in it, you're teaching it as well.
Right.
And I know the tricky is, you sort of
It's modified.
identifying as you transition, you know, what you're getting rid of, I think.
Yeah, and I can't see us saying, oh, we're just not doing anything.
Right.
There are just like definite components, like the narrative model and following just like the different genres of writing has been very beneficial to students and how it carries over across grade level. I think what the component that's missing a little bit is the sentence structure, paragraph structure, you know, grammar,
The scaffolds that are necessary.
the component of them getting ideas and generating ideas is fantastic, and just their enthusiasm for writing is fantastic. So we wouldn't want that ever to go away. But at some point you look at a piece of writing and you're like, oh, you know, they don't have a capital, they don't just like mechanics. One area I think would be just to try to weave that in a little bit.
That for kids who like need more support, like they need more structure, there's not that much structure to some of the writing units study. So to see more scaffolding and places that you can put in to support kiddos who need extra help, I think would be important.
But that would be interesting.
To see like which is not working, but what does work. I think
And teachers right now are pretty much creating more of that themselves, you know, and supplementing a lot themselves in those areas. And then some of those intervention curriculums will address it. So for example, like a PAF curriculum will teach sentence structure as you're also teaching, you know, the decoding and blending. And then eventually the kids they're always learning those skills and spelling and writing full sentences simultaneously. So that's where they're getting that the grammar, the syntax, all of that will go through those intervention programs. But it's not necessarily in it's in the intervention program, but not in the general education program. Okay, so that's what they're building it in.
And we do like incorporate it through other aspects of our day, like morning message and, you know, just different scenarios, but to have it be a component of their actual writing.
Does anyone else have any other questions? The only other, like, I'm not sure if it's a question, but I know we invested heavily in PD for Teachers College, but also in the classroom library. And you referenced those a couple of times. Are you seeing an impact from having, I mean, the middle school has walls with books in the ELA classroom. Is that powerful for the students? Is it a useful teaching
Yeah,
tool?
definitely.
Is that lead,
Yeah.
regardless of how it connects to the curriculum? Is that a place where you want to continue to see reinvestment?
Yes, definitely. I mean, especially, books get well read over years, we need to re-supplement those, but the students love being able to go self-select books and have like a variety of different topics for them to pick from is also beneficial. But, yeah, the classroom libraries are like, if you walk into any classroom building, you'll see that's one of the main focus areas in the
Discussion. Thank you so much again for your time and really appreciate it. If the board has follow-up questions, send them to Carla. I'm sure I can pass them on.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, going to move on to public comment. Public comment is intended for members of the community to speak openly and voice concerns in accordance with policy 15 through the Garrison Union Free School District. Any person wishing to speak shall comply with all provisions of this policy. Comments about specific school personnel or individual students is a violation of board policy. Concerns regarding students or personnel should be discussed privately with the superintendent or appropriate administrator. Comments should be limited to 3 minutes, and speakers are asked to conduct themselves in a respectful manner. The board will listen to comments but will not engage in dialogue. Any necessary follow-up will be noted and provided through the appropriate channels. Members of the public wishing to comment during board meetings are asked to place their name and town of residence on the sign-in sheet. Commenters will be invited to the podium. See anybody? I've noted on my sign-in sheet to keep us moving along. All right, we're going to go on to accept the minutes. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District does hereby accept the minutes of the regular business meeting of January 10th, 2024 as presented. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second. Do you have any questions or comments on the minutes as presented? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstentions. Thank you. Move on to financial reports. Be resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby accepts the treasurer's report for December 23 and the claims audit report for January 2024 as presented. May I have a motion, please? So moved. Somebody got it right, don't you? All right. Do I have any questions on the report that's presented? I just had one on the extra activity report, Joe. The 44,000 that's in savings is the money we looked at in the audit for student government, the other clubs. Is that correct?
That's
That's
the,
in the savings account,
yeah, that's the
So-
entirety of
Of what was-
all of it together.
rounded together. And then in the checking account is the current 8th grade fund. So that's more mobile money.
I have to verify that.
Okay. That's my only question. Any other questions? Okay. All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Please, abstention. All right, we're gonna move on to committee reports. I'm gonna go to Kent first with Finance Committee.
Yeah, so we, the finance committee met before this meeting, with Joe and Carl, for a quick first look at the draft budget this year. We did kind of a deep dive into some of the anticipated expenses and costs, as well as the revenues. I think the headline on the revenues, as everyone has read, is the state has reduced our aid by 12%, $234,000. So that's definitely a concern. We have had some good news on the revenue side. The grants that Carl mentioned for some of the special aid that our local elected officials have helped us out with. It's been very positive. We've also done very well with interest income, which has been very positive for us as well, which we anticipate to continue as the Fed has indicated they will drop those anytime soon. And so, while we do have that good news, we do have some cost drivers as well. We're looking at opening a bid for transportation. So we have a little bit of uncertainty there, probably a 10% increase that we're going to put in the budget for that. Our high school tuition, while we have great partners in our 3 high schools now, and this kind of set costs with that, we are at a peak as far as enrollment there next year. So we've known that's coming. Not a surprise, but definitely more in control than we used to have it. But overall, the takeaway from all of this is that it's looking very positive that we will not need to go out for an override this year. which I think is a good news for the community and good news for this board and the school. Overall, we're in pretty good shape. We've had a lot of good things happen to us, which we've talked about in previous audit reports, things like that. So 2 weeks from now, we will do our first public draft of the budget on the 28th, which I'm sure we will all, by the time that it goes public, really know very, very well. And past years are precedents, but looking forward to sharing that with the public. And thank you, Joe and Carl, for great work on this so far.
Questions for him?
No questions.
I'm just wondering on the cut in foundation aid. I assume we won't get final word on that until the budget is passed.
It's not likely that we'll know. And so we have to set our budget by May or April. We have to set our budget by April. The state process for setting their budget usually drags. And this last few years it's dragged into May. So we won't know. Obviously, if we get money back, that can go in the following year's budget.
We'll plan based upon not getting the foundation aid, and then if it comes, that just improves the financial picture for the subsequent years.
And so how will that affect development of the budget? I mean, if we're not planning on doing an override, it's 260 or something that we're looking at a whole. I know that we've got some
34. 234 for the foundation aid, but we have some increases in some of the cost-based aids that offset some of that. So the actual year-to-year change in aid is closer to 120,000. So yeah, because we have as we use more BOCES services, we get more BOCES aid back, and so when they initially calculate the projection for what we're going to get next year, and based upon the information they know, they don't have all the information as it goes through the year. And if you have changes in your foundation aid, changes in your BOCES aid, it shows up in the subsequent year. So last year we implemented the arts and education program, and not all the expenses showed up on the BOCES bill until the year was completed. So that's part of the reason why.
So we've got some additional money back from BOCES this year.
Yeah. Yes.
And the interest number is not insignificant.
It's a lot.
It pretty much made up for the.
Yeah. But there's still quite a lot in reserve that we may or may not have to fully tap.
Well, we have
Well-
11, we have an 11% range.
Yeah, right now we're at 1.4 and the designated reserve. I love one of each line. That's a lot higher than 4% allowable.
Yeah.
But also we are gonna have an overage this year.
Yeah.
Right, Joe? Like we're gonna run,
Yeah.
we're gonna have money rolling.
Yeah,
in.
so there are a number of items that were advantageous to us, and some of that was realized in last year's results and discussed in the review of the audit committee presentation and from the outside auditor. But then some of it is also occurring this year that we had some things that we budgeted for based upon the knowledge of what we had this time last year, and those expenses did not materialize, so that's good.
Yeah. So, great. And then in the facilities committee meeting, we had talked about, budgeting for some of these additional critical roof repairs, those sort of things. We obviously now are getting this additional funding from the state. My understanding was that there are a couple projects that are, pretty dire in terms of the roof situation. Are we still planning on capital?
Yes, so there is a
allocation
capital,
for that?
there's a capital allocation for that's going to be
The
designated.
gym roof.
And we did get a grant back from that, but we won't be able to realize that until after the roof is completed. So that will also be something that we would get back in the phone.
So would we consider doing anything beyond the gym roofs if we're getting the funds from the state? Would we consider, I know that over the original school building that is pretty bad?
Yeah, there's a number of roofs that are at or beyond their life. The gym one is as far as active leaks, the worst one. So that's the one we start with. And right now, that's the only planned element for next year, because it does, that one's also the least complicated. It's one of the larger sections, but it's the least complicated because it doesn't require, all the special removals and testing and stuff that's required on this roof, in this roof, because the advantage of it being pitched so much is not actively leaking. You know, it looks pretty bad.
So one of the things we talked about in the committee though, is that the idea, because that 125 we get back comes back after the project is complete,
Yeah.
continuing to roll this over into the next project and the next project. So while the roof is in this year, and there may be a couple of little ones, it may be useful for you to send a list from facilities committee over to Ken and Joe, just sort of prioritizing what else you guys have seen. I know Joe's probably in the facilities as well, so he sees those. We're not going to get them all in this year.
Yeah.
Because while we have surplus funds, we're still looking at possibly staying under the cap.
Yeah.
But
So we will still, doesn't give them how the mechanics work, we will still budget for a capital project. And then we'll recoup the money.
and it's the term sheet is capital improvement, right? Because a capital project would be something that requires a separate vote.
So, capital expenses. So capital expenses are both the financing of the capital expenses and directly doing capital work. Capital work is not considered a repair. It's considered a replacement of an element. There are multiple ways that you can do it. You can go out for a bond and do what we did for the project that's just finishing, or you can build it as a part of your budget. And because we don't have any debt service that's going to be retiring anytime soon, we think one of the ways to do this is to do projects every year, and that increases the component of your tax levy that's related to capital, because basically they take all the expenses that are related to capital, those any bonds that you have, and any capital expenses that you do currently. You reduce that by any aid that you're going to get back, and that is your capital exclusion that's a part of your tax levy. Whatever that number amounts to be, it won't increase you won't go over the cap from it. It just increases the percentage that's allowable by whatever the exclusion is. So
What's a reason not to do a ton of that?
right, because it would just add on to the tax levy and make it out of step with other school districts. So you have to balance that. So this year, the difference between the prior year capital allocation amount from the water heaters, which is still to be completed, and is difference between 45,000 and 250,000. So that increased the levy by 210,000. Okay, and that is included as a part of the math for the tax gap. So you can increase by an additional 210,000, and that's still a simple majority.
Right. Great, thank you.
Yep.
One more question. So obviously you'll start this presentation about, science of reading and everything. How do we account for whatever investments might be necessary for that type of, I don't
There
know
are
what the
some
expenses are.
PD dollars that were mentioned as part of that.
Yeah, so we
Anticipated budget.
did put a placeholder in here for $30,000 worth of training for reading, specifically based upon initial estimates that the administrative team had come up.
And so is that sort of is that a higher investment?
That's an additional investment of $30,000 above things that we already had in the budget. Yes.
I think it's important to note that every department was asked, probably back in December, right, what they wanted to see in this budget. So the budget isn't just coming from,
No.
Joe's office, it's really coming out of what the teachers asked for.
Yeah, but we're accounting for those types of surges of curricular development or anything like that. Yes. Yeah. Great.
Any other questions for Ken? Good. Okay. But I would send a list.
Yeah.
Over.
Yeah.
So that facilities and finance are always working together as we.
Yeah.
Thank you. Policy committee, Brittany.
So policy committee met 2 weeks ago. We had
Dusty, as always, had a very comprehensive packet of what needed to be reviewed. Because our previous policy committee meeting kept getting pushed, it was right after that one in December that Dusty then got a whole load of things that needed to be updated. So hence the reason I believe we have 3 policies to review shortly, and one of which is a new policy, workplace violence prevention policy, and required by the state, and legally we need to adopt it within a certain time frame, which is why we put it on the agenda for tonight to do it all in one reading. Typically, any new policies take 2 readings to have a chance for the board and for the public to respond. And we decided to take the risk that perhaps the public wouldn't have much to say about this one, and we can get it adopted tonight. We've got a couple of others that are being reviewed by legal counsel, and we'll bring those to you in probably a month or 2.
Do you want to wait and address questions on the policy when we get them on the agenda?
Sure.
Sounds good. Anyone else have any other questions for our policy committee? Yep. Planning committee, Jocelyn.
Planning met last week, and we really just discussed mainly maybe some budget considerations, you know, that the planning team might want to include in the supplemental budget. For example, one of them was focusing on ELA, curriculum and professional learning. And then we got an update that the report cards that will be aligned with the vision of the graduate are still being worked on, and it's promising that they'll be like soon.
Any questions for Jocelyn? My only question would be, once the report cards are done, do you want to put a presentation on so everyone can see it and we'll present what it looks like publicly? You just let me know. We'll add it to the agenda item. Budget advisory committee.
Since our last board meeting, when we appointed Tim Cargan and Justin Connor as our committee members on the budget advisory committee, we've met twice, and I have to just say they have been amazing at the information they're able to share with us. And I really think as a community, we owe them a big thank you, because we gained a lot of insight that I don't think there was any way. Yeah. So as a committee, we met on January 22nd, and we had a very quick turnaround and met again just this past Monday. And in the interim, Joan's office put together a whole bunch of information, including electric bills, maps of the roof. We had, when we first met, we went on a tour to see kind of where the leaks were and talk about all the different options. And so when we met on Monday, we came up with a bunch of different information that I'll quickly share with you. I did, Ken, I don't know if you saw the email. I sent it to you today to say, you know, if you would need it prior to the finance committee meeting today. So we talked about the options of purchasing solar, entering into a power purchase agreement known as a PPA, joining a community solar project, location of solar panels, and the ability to use solar to cover the district's electrical needs. So with purchasing solar, while we don't have specific quotes, we believe the price for purchasing solar for the gymnasium roof would be between $150,000 and $200,000, and could potentially pay for itself in 5 to 7 years. If we purchase it, we would be responsible for all maintenance, and the solar would be placed on the south-facing side of the roof only, because the return on investment for the north-facing side doesn't make any sense. In terms of the power purchase agreement, while again we don't have specific quotes, we believe we could save between 10 to 12% of our electric bills if we went with a power purchase agreement. There's a question of whether we could segment our electric usage, because we do get it for 4 different bills, Joe, on electric. So one of the suggestions from either Jesse or Tim was, if one of those is using electric more at peak times, is that something that we could kind of target in how we look at how to apply any credits for any electric, any solar usage? So that's something that we should think of looking into if we move forward for a power purchase agreement. One idea that came up is this community solar project, which you can participate in, but it doesn't cost you any money, and it should probably save us about 10% on our electric bills. However, we do have to be careful because Joe did an amazing job negotiating a very low electric rate, which both of our community members are surprised he got it so low. And we want to make sure that we're not conflicting by having, buying into a community solar project and also having that pre-negotiated lower rate for our electric. Solar panels locations, we talked about, so Jesse did a map as though he could fully equip the entire campus with all the rooms, with all the solar. Even with that, we would not be recouping what we spend on electric. And it would also involve having to have, I guess that's the field adjacent to the garden, would need to have like multiple stacks of multiple solar panels there in order to have a decent amount of return on investment of the solar panels that would be put out. One of the things that I learned that I thought was interesting is a lot of having solar in your home and a lot of other places, it involves charging a battery that is then used to feed your electric. But on schools, you don't put battery because they can. And so, and once they catch on fire, if they catch on fire, you really can't put them out. They just have to burn. So that is an interesting way that solar is used differently in school as opposed to potentially in home. We scared Sarah, but it was very good that you did enjoy it. You bought it. So our recommendation at this time is that we should investigate enrolling in a community solar project as soon as possible, as long as it does not conflict with the program that Joe has already enrolled us in. And then to potentially explore solar for the 25-26 budget year. And at that point, we'll get selected either a direct purchase or one of the plans based on the budget parameters that existed then. And so I sent a memo to Kent, and I guess I can send it to the rest of the board.
I think it'd be great. I just want to that I could already did as well. You ran a great meeting. I apologize for how long I made the rest of them. It was very effective, and I also wanted to thank the community members. The amount of work they had to do outside of those meetings was really amazing, and their ability to really inform the process. Then one of the big takeaways I had from it, as someone who does not understand solar very well, is that we would only be able to power or cover the power use of about 30%. Even if we did all that, took away that field, fenced that whole area, we fenced off, protective fencing for kids, we still don't get even close to 50% of our power usage. So there's sort of that, does it make sense when you can access these community solar fields that are designed for this? But they both spoke very highly of.
And the community solar field wouldn't really take us any, wouldn't require any investment.
Nothing.
I mean, it's.
And it could save us 10%.
Yeah, so it's committing to purchase solar generated power from a site that's nearby your school potentially, or at least in the geographic zone that your utility covers. So it has to be a central Hudson utility area.
And there are a lot of options.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of who will give you the most bang for your buck for summing up and not paying.
And one of the, I forget whether Jesse or Jim suggested that if you want to include an educational component, you'll have our environmental science teacher take the kids on the field to see this field, see how it's constructed, what it does, learn from them, which was really an interesting idea that doesn't have to be physically right here taking up. We don't actually have a lot of land for solar. Once you start looking at it.
Well, unless you want to chop down a bunch of trees, which I don't think any of us have any interest in.
So just another quick question that you see the schools like Haldane has panels up, Hutton Valley has panels up. Like, are they not getting? Did you guys talk at all about like, are they getting like 20% of their power?
Haldane's are connected.
Oh, they are. They are connected.
Can they sense? You said something interesting that some organizations, and I'm not saying schools that you mentioned, but just in general, some organizations panels in the front of the building for show.
That's not what Haldane did. They had a real project.
No, but they mentioned that, and what was very valuable was they really crunched the numbers. And if we replaced all of our roofs and used all of our available land, we, as Sarah said,
It's 30 to 40%.
you still can't cover our power bill, and it just seems like this community solar is just economic.
Very low risk.
It's the way to go, and then there's no risk and no maintenance to us. So that was my big takeaway, but they did say that some people put the
Yeah,
show.
no, but a power purchase agreement doesn't have risk either, except in the case when the company that does it goes out of business, and then you're stuck with non-working solar that could potentially catch fire on your roof.
Yeah, I still come back to the idea that it doesn't really cover much of our costs.
Yeah.
We would be fully solar powered by going with the community solar. It just would be off-site essentially.
Well, we wouldn't be fully powering our district, but we would be, a percentage of our electric would come from solar.
And then if you pin that community solar with your recommendation to the committee to install,
Well, we're saying, yeah, we
then
could,
you
right,
still save more.
right, absolutely.
Do we have a sense of how much we could subscribe to on community solar? I know that some.
Not yet, no, you haven't done
There's a
any
lot of demand, I
investigation.
think, for those projects.
But there is a lot of openings.
Are there?
There are, I think, the list he sent us out over 20 projects that are currently open.
I say, yeah, the community members who volunteer their time have a lot of knowledge and sort of how to do that.
Yeah.
They,
They're building.
yeah, they're building it right now. And they volunteer their time to really walk our administrative team through how to do it, which is very generous.
And I think, I mean, personally, I think the sooner we can investigate that and figure out whether or not we could do it based on the negotiated rate that you have and sign up immediately, I mean, the sooner the better, because why not start saving if we can? And again, there is that question. And I mean, Joe should be complimented for negotiating a very, very good rate on our current electric, which I don't know how much longer that is in effect for.
It's in effect till January or February of next year.
So,
So, you know, we
so
have to
if
start.
nothing else, we could be
start
ready to
working on
pull
it
the
anyway.
trigger on the community solar immediately if that is a.
Sorry, one final question. Did they mention 30 to 40% even if we stack that field with panels? Did they mention like what percentage we just typically versus leaving that field?
Yes, they
alone?
have that in the diagram.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think it was like, 10 to 15% if we did the gym roof, it would be like 8 to 10%. And then if we did the other roofs, we could be like 15 to 18%.
And then a full hack that comes from the field out by,
The field
Where
was
the
the
garden
the biggest contributor.
Did they do parking canopy?
Parking had to be,
the big
construction.
pine tree is a problem.
The parking tree is a problem, and also the construction of the material that has to hold the solar. It's expensive.
So even to get to 15%, you would have to use the open field that's beyond the.
I think we
The
could get
field
to
by itself
15.
would do 15, but you would have to do all of the available roofs on the building to get the other 15.
But, and it was recommended not to do the very oldest roof because of all the asbestos involved with that would not be a roof that you would even want to.
So
They did a
just
really
the
big
gym.
diagram of the trees too, to show like where, without, you could take out a lot of trees to make more.
Because as you get to the lower elementary section, you got a ton of tree cover on that side, so that really you can only get the roof that's like above this hallway here. They had potential designs for that, but you know, that also is so as you get past this side of the building, it's all foam roof, which is it's not good.
Yeah.
And you know, to mount panels on top of it is.
Now you have to replace the roof first.
Sorry. So to get to even, so if we were to do just the roofs that we would feel comfortable with, like the south side of the gym, parts of this building, that would get us what into
The
the.
only thing we would feel comfortable with at this point is the south side of the gym once the roof is replaced.
And everything else.
And then-
That was,
Ten.
I think it's a 10.
8 to 10.
I would recommend if Jesse is comfortable with it, sending out what you provide to the committee, to the whole board. Follow that too. That would be useful. He had on.
But actually, Sarah, I think absent a presentation on that, I'm not sure. I think we would need to like write up the description.
Yeah,
right,
to
and
understand what it was.
Just putting out the graphic that doesn't really, it was the story they told us behind it.
And that's a good point.
And all those stories convinced us that the right way to go is to not do any of that and try to sign up for a community, solar.
And we convinced them as well. And I mean, there's like some other interesting parts there, like where the pitch of the roof, the panel would have to be pitched in a certain way. So there's concern that how you anchor that into the gym, but there's all kinds of other complicating factors. But again, it doesn't mean that if we can put aside money, maybe have an extra budget for the budget the year after, and we start having that conversation, that we have someone come in and give us a true estimate. And see what they come back with. And, you know, technology is changing all the time, so.
But if we did a PPA, we would have to invest money.
No, we don't invest money in PPA.
So like the process of this could live without outside of the budget.
For the PPA, not if we wanted to buy it ourselves.
But does that really, you didn't recommend that would be.
I think that was kind of our thinking is that for not next year, but the following year to consider the PPA once the new roof is installed.
Yeah.
Because we can't do anything with the current roof. And then you also have to look at when you install the solar, if you're avoiding the roof warranty.
We also did ask the question of like, are they supposed to be done at the same time? And
They said,
these guys have been on the roofs doing it and they said no.
But your recommendation isn't to invest in us buying the panels. It would just
At
be,
this point. But again, you know, in 16 months that could change if new technology does.
but even though that gym roof is the most appropriate one in that it's in the right direction and the angle of the slope of the roof is good, because of the way it's constructed and the span between all the roof beams is actually very large, you would have to design a special framework that would make it more costly than you would have on a typical installation. Even though that's the best one, there's still complicating factors.
Flat roofs are the best, so once we can replace those foam roofs, that might be a really good time to look at or to do. But
I think they obviously mentioned incentives for like New York State for the roof replacement tied to.
so, yeah, so incentives are a tricky thing because we're a public school district, and so some of the incentives are tied into how you get loans to fund the solar, which
And
has.
tax abatements. that we don't have.
Right.
They ran through a whole list and they were actually very knowledgeable. I will say the idea of inviting community members who have a very strong knowledge in a specific area into worked phenomenally. That was a really great process. They were wonderful. They did really well. All right, do we have any other questions for Jennifer?
thank you.
Or-
So just in terms
Yeah.
of next steps, you may have mentioned that already, but what,
So the next step, we were recommending that we should investigate enrolling in the community solar project as soon as possible, just as long as it does not impact the negotiated rate for our electric. And then to maybe again, next year, look at solar again for 25, 26.
and so you guys meeting again, or did you guys?
So we weren't at this point.
No, it's just work on my end as far as making sure that I'm not gonna void the agreement for the power we currently purchase. And then look at projects that we can sign on to. So I have the terms and conditions of what we're currently purchasing and just get that.
And- And the two community members offered to help us walk through and help us find a project that would give us the best possible rate.
Thank you. All right, we're going to CSE, CPSE recommendation. Be resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District approved the Committee on Special Education, CSE, and Committee on Preschool Special Education, CPSE. Recommendations and student placements. May I have a motion, please? Second. Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays, abstention. Okay. Moving on to the first reading and approval of policy 6190, workplace violence prevention. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District, upon the recommendation of Courtney McCarthy, Policy Committee Chair, does hereby waive the second reading rule and approve policy 6190, workplace violence prevention policy statement as presented. May I have a motion, please? Yeah. Do you have any questions? We're only doing one reading of this, so. This is a very lengthy policy. Courtney, do you want to speak to any of the specifics that were in that committee? Carl?
Yeah, just basically, this is if an employee feels unsafe, and they bring it to the attention of any administrator. This really has a very prescribed process and steps that we need to take as an employer, as a school district, to protect our employees. So it was previously for, I think, businesses and other companies, but that now it applies to schools as well, and it's mandated. And it's very detailed, and every step is outlined clearly for what we need to follow.
So does the advisory committee not have much work to do with outlining for you? You have to appoint people to the other committee.
Exactly. So we just internally, once it's approved, we have to discuss who does what, and just make sure everyone understands their role if a report is made that someone feels unsafe or feels that they are in danger.
Some of the specifics on here that it references are things like using drop safes or other methods to minimize cash on hand. Are these practices we're already doing in order to make sure we don't have cash?
Yeah, so
on the building?
we have procedures to limit the amount of time that cash sits around in the building. We also have safes to store until it gets deposited. And the bank we use is right up the road in Cold Spring. So if we get a deposit on a Friday for extra classroom, it usually goes in. That's what happens.
One other question I had is under the training, all employees who participate in the district's workplace violence prevention training program. That's something we need to create, correct? Or do we already have one that we use when we hire?
We have an online system that all of our employees annually go through required online courses. There's an assessment after each one, and this will be added for next school year. And the employees actually complete these trainings in the summer. For certain groups, we extend that into the fall, but everyone, throughout the school year completes all the trainings, including this one.
Any other questions on this policy before we move to the vote? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Abstention. So next we have the first reading of policy 7530, child abuse and maltreatment. Are you going to stay on this one?
Again, legally required. This is just the first reading. Let me see. I have any notes on which
These are just first reading. Do you have any questions on this one? We'll bring this back for a vote at the next meeting. Good. Next one is a first reading of policy 7440, student voter registration and pre-registration.
The only one with this one I have a note on is making sure that we reach out and coordinate with our high schools, since we don't actually have any students in this building that are able to register to vote. But we are responsible for our high school students, so make sure that they have all the pertinent information.
Do you have any questions on student voter registration and pre-registration? Go ahead and move on. We'll see this again next time. Moving on to the personnel items. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, hereby approves the items on the personnel consent agenda as presented. May I have a motion, please?
Second.
Thank you. There's just two items on here, which is a facilities committee community member, which are before, and per diem spot. Do you have any questions from the board on these? I'm gonna go ahead and move to a vote then. Do you want me to wait for Johnson to come back for the vote, or go ahead? Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nay, abstention. Next up, we're gonna move on to new business. Be it resolved, Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby approves the new business items as presented. May I have a motion, please?
Second.
Thank you. Can you speak to these, Carl?
Just quickly, we are accessing some technology equipment that has reached end of life. This is the appropriate process to do that. GSEF, once again, has awarded some wonderful grants for our students. Trips to T-Town, the Garrison Arts Center, also to the Museum of Natural History, and thinking of our earlier literacy presentation, these experiences really enhance children's overall educational experience. And I just want to say thank you to GSEF. I think they're very thoughtful about the grants they award, making sure they align with our goals for education, and they really enhance our children's experience. The sports mergers are with Haldane for next year. Thanks to Mr. Beckley for coordinating and arranging. So our students have the ability to participate in sports that we can't offer here in Garrison, things such as lacrosse, cross country now is going to be offered. And we appreciate that partnership with Haldane. The budget transfer, I'll turn over to Joe.
Yep, I'll do the last two items there. So for the budget transfer, in the development of the budget last year, in anticipation of a contract settlement with the teachers union, we allocated some funds within the budget to set aside for that. And then now this is actually putting those funds to work in the account codes where all the expenses are to be incurred. So that's the budget transfer. And the change order that you have on the agenda, I'm sorry, apologize for the lateness. The architect held things up as far as getting the signed change order back to us, but this is the last change order for the general contractor, and it's a negotiated credit to close out the project and recognize some additional expenses that the district incurs for architect's fees, as well as the replacement of the sod field that fixed. So there's a net credit of $24,000. And this will close out the contract with our general contractor, and then we will only have one contract open left in that. Everything else will be closed.
Any questions for Carl or Joe before we move to a vote? Okay. All in favor, please say aye. Nays, abstentions. Come to the second public comment. Go ahead and move on to that. They still don't see you. Board member comment and other discussion. Jocelyn.
One, clarify the last board meeting, we brought up the mural idea, community engagement to create art. They're somewhere in this room or somewhere in the school, so they're not aware, but I want to clarify that GSEF is not funding that. And so I do hope that, since the minutes reflect that we kind of discussed it and we're in favor of moving forward, perhaps, then we consider adding that for the budget, or at least consider a program of that. My second comment unrelated to that. Okay, I know we were planning, we talk about communication all the time, and we were planning maybe 3. I know we did one, and I know one is the budget one. Are we gonna do it?
Yeah.
One is in draft form.
And that's what I don't get, like, she's not happy with the full arrangement yet.
No, we're still trying to get something.
So it's like,
I can't show this.
That's all.
It's in draft already.
I'm psyched for
It
it,
looks
and there's
really-
probably a lot of great things to celebrate, and I wonder since you're already working on it, amazing. Is there any small educational piece about the budget that should be in there that gets lost in the? There's a lot of stuff being said about the budget already. And yeah, we stayed 18 months, so I'm glad to hear that that's in there.
I will say it's a very positive newsletter, to be honest, that talks about the Early Mail Voter Act, which is important information, the budget process dates to remember Dusty put in, and thanking, our senator and representative for their aid. Beyond that, it's really talking about what we've done.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Right. Okay. I'll hide that again. David?
Nothing here.
Okay. Jennifer?
So two things. First, I'd like to thank GSAP for the grant money. I think it's terrific that they're able to help support our students. And secondly, Sarah, while you love audits, I kind of like policy manuals. And I've been reviewing our policy manual a little. In light of that, we're in the process of hiring a new superintendent. I think we should consider a no nepotism policy in our hiring practices. A lot of the districts have that, and I think it might be a policy that the policy committee should look into and consider.
I'm glad you love policy. It's one of the reasons I'm trying to for it. I think it's. But yeah, let's kick that over to the policy committee. I think that's a great idea. Sorry.
My daughter would make a hell of a dance instructor. I don't know.
Yeah,
Nothing further from me.
okay. Courtney?
Nope, other than thank you for the suggestion, and I took it and forwarded it to Carl and Dusty, and we'll bring it up at the next policy meeting for us to discuss. Nothing else for me.
I just wanted to congratulate our two basketball teams. They both ended their seasons tonight. The boys got a win.
You gotta win?
Got a win, and
You're
the
kidding.
girls were winning in the after the fourth quarter. And I don't know if that means they won or not, but I just
Oh,
having
they're like the Knicks, you never know.
having players on both teams. A little biased, but Coach Van on the boys' side did a tremendous job. The development of the team and really the whole goal of the modified program to teach these boys how to play basketball, some of which have never played. They made huge improvements. So he did a great job. And same thing on the girls' side with Coach Pete. It's really fun to watch them get better. So just wanted to point that out. And now we're on to baseball and softball across.
I'm so excited they got away and so disappointed I was in finance committee instead of being there, but I think finance committee was equally fun.
Not as fun as audit.
You know what? But now everyone smiles when I say audit. Don't you just, doesn't it brighten your impression of audit now, right? Like you think of it as fun. You just need to have that mentality going into it. And we learn so much. All right, I have nothing further. We do have exec session. So here is all the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Preschool District hereby enters into executive session for the purpose of reviewing probationary instructional staff and discussing the employment history of particular persons. May I have a motion, please?
So, second.
All in favor, please say aye. Nays, abstentions. All right, please close out, turn off your computers. We will adjourn executive session with no further